From the studios of KENW on the campus of Eastern New Mexico University, it's You Should Know, featuring the people and events of Eastern New Mexico and West Texas.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Evelyn Ledbetter, the host of You Should Know, and my guest today is Mike Cohn. He's the chairman of the board of the Roosevelt County Soil and Water Conservation District. Mike, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely.
Water's a big concern. That's been a hot topic in a lot of things, and a lot of people probably don't even realize that this district exists.
That's true. You know, we say a lot of times around the state, especially a lot of our state meetings, we say that we're the best kept secret in New Mexico.
That's true. That's true. Well, tell me a little bit about I've known you for years. We won't say how many. But tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, Evelyn, I will admit this, that I was born in Texas. I'm not a native New Mexican, but ever since I was 2 years old, we've lived here in the Portales area. With the exception of the 5 years I was gone to college, and then came back after college and was going to get rich farming, and been farming ever since. Hadn't hit that mark yet, but that's kind of my background. I am a farmer. I am a rancher, involved heavily in production agriculture, mainly dryland farming, and run some cattle, and we're very active in the livestock showing program as well, and raise a lot of those cattle.
Well, I know you're really involved in a lot of different areas of serving on boards of the Fair Board, and super involved with FFA and the judging. And,
yes.
And I know we've bought one of your steers and ate that guy, and very tasty, thank you. So I'll vouch for your quality.
All right, good.
So let's start off with this. Tell me about what the Soil and Water Conservation Board is. What is that about?
The Roosevelt Soil and Water District is based in Roosevelt County. We do not engulf the entire county of Roosevelt. Actually, there are 3 districts that take up Roosevelt County. Most people think that we are just, you follow county lines, but the districts don't. There are 47 districts across the state of New Mexico. And with the exception, I think Lee is the only one that actually follows county lines and state lines. Okay. And other than that, all the rest of the districts are, who drove these lines up? I have no idea, but sometimes I scratch my head and I wonder, what were they thinking?
So no rhyme or reason as to how that came about?
Not really. I mean, a lot of them, they kind of said they kind of followed watersheds at the original. I've heard that concept brought out, that they kind of, this watershed is engulfed this district and so forth. So, but, we do have a watershed here. You wonder, how does that work? We don't have a river or anything.
But let's stop on that.
Yes, sir.
But before you brought that up, tell me what a watershed is. That's an interesting concept.
Watersheds basically is the terrain of the land and how water will shed off the land and incorporate into, most of the time when you think of a watershed, you think of the Pecos River, and everything's going to flow to the river and down the river. And whereas we don't have rivers, we do have a watershed. And a lot of those, they'll flow. Playa lakes or places where our aquifer can, replenish. There's the word I'm hunting. I need help every once in a while.
I do too. So.
And so, these are people that are much more educated and smarter than me figured these things out years ago. And so in a nutshell, that's kind of what a watershed is.
It's interesting where you hear big rivers, but the start of that river, the head of it may be where there's not any basically at all.
That's right.
The Mississippi, I think it's North Dakota or South Dakota where it started. So
yes.
Anyway, interesting. So these districts were formed a long time ago.
Yes, they were back in the 30s. Basically after the Dust Bowl, the Great Depression was going on, there was a huge push for the nation to rethink its agriculture way of producing. And so they, through different acts on the federal level, they formed the Soil Conservation Service, which was a federal agency, and it retained that name all the way through to, I believe, 1984, and they changed their name to the Natural Resource and Conservation Service, which is the federal side of things. Well, along with this, there was state-driven local boards being developed. And those were eventually called soil and water districts. And the whole rhyme and reason behind those was to have local input into how conservation should be dealt with as far as soil and water. You know, back in the 30s, the Dust Bowl was going on, so it was all about soil, all about stopping, you know, the blowing dirt and the brown skies that we see around here from time to time, you know, to try to help curb that, whether it be through financial assistance or whether it be through, you know, getting people to educate our local farmers into different practices and things of that nature to help curb some of those things. So that was the initial start of it. Since then, soil and water districts have changed, or they hadn't changed. I mean, that is still, as far as flooding and soil erosion and so forth, that is their ultimate goal. You know, our district, as you mentioned in the opening about water, has been a big concern in Portales this summer.
Yeah, right now we're not, when you hear soil and water, we don't focus so much on the soil until like this past spring when you couldn't see.
True.
But now it's the water thing is what's piquing everybody's interest.
We, as our district, we have a land use plan in place, which is a legal document. It's filed with the state and with the county clerk down here. And in that, whenever we revamped it back in, I believe, 14, you know, every year, every 2-3 years, we kind of update it a little bit, you know, what are new concerns that we see in our district. And we kind of, you know, before, our number one resource concern was soil, and number two was water. Well, back in 2014, we flipped those two. And our soil and water district, we do have a lot of projects and a lot of things that we're doing that are probably based more towards water than they are towards soil, like they used to be, you know, back in the 30s and the 50s and everything, whenever it was so dry and dirt blew so bad.
When you talk about the different districts, and it makes sense, even 100 miles away, the different soil, or even within 10 miles, you can have different soil, or within the same field.
Yeah, absolutely.
But definitely, you know, very far away, you deal with different issues of the soil types and the contour of the land and the wind and the environmental issues there. So having one district to serve the whole state or a whole big area does not make sense.
No, it does not. You know, the eastern side of the state, you know, we have a lot of the same concerns and same issues. And so a lot of the districts, like the one to the north of us, is called Central Curry, which engulfs Curry County and the panhandle of Roosevelt. And then you get Southwest Quay and so forth going north. You have Lee south of, you know, a lot of us, we have the same concerns, same issues going on. And so we can work hand in hand with each other on a lot of things. And sometimes 2 or 3 working together is better than one lone soldier out there by himself. So a lot of these bigger projects, we can kind of work with some of our neighboring districts that we have some common things with.
To me, I've in my experience, people that call themselves environmentalists, farmers and ranchers, probably have the biggest stake in what they want to take care of that land, and that that's your financial part and also your passion typically of taking care of the resources that you've been blessed with. Or cursed with sometimes. I don't know which
Absolutely.
side. But, so how did you get started being in, or how long have you served on this board?
I believe I got on the board back in 2001.
Okay.
I was a young farmer back then, and unfortunately the hair's disappeared and things have turned a little gray here since, but you know, I've been on the board a while, and the big thing, one of our projects that we deal with and is cloud seeding. And that was whenever it was fresh, it was new, it was rolling kind of in its young youth stage back then. And I had a lady ask me, said, we'd like for you to be on this board because we need someone that's young, energetic, and is passionate about it. And I was passionate about it, and still am to this day. And that was probably the main reason I got on the board. Didn't have a clue all the other things that go on, and you know, that the power and the things that the soil and water districts can oversee and can do is really fascinating, you know, because we are a state entity. You know, most people do not realize that we are governed by the state of New Mexico through the District Act, which came along back in, I believe, 78. It's never all we became official, so to say, of part of the state. And so the districts through that District Act gave them some power, so to say.
Now, are you administered underneath the umbrella of the New Mexico Department of Ag? Is that right?
New Mexico Department of Ag oversees us.
Okay.
Yes. They are one that advises soil and water districts. We do have a representative from Department of Ag that's like at every one of our monthly meetings and advises us on different correct ways, I guess, to say that we should be doing things or shouldn't be.
They slap you on the wrist if you're not.
Yeah, say, no, guys, slow down, come back over here. You know, we need to get back in the middle, not over there. And so the Department of Ag, we do work hand in hand with. And you know, I mentioned the NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service. They are the federal agency.
Okay.
We are a state agency, and we work in partnership with each other. Now, most of the money that producers are allowed to get comes through the federal side of things.
Okay.
And we're more the on-ground type of people that are talking to our neighbors and so forth, the other guys that are out there trying to make a living off this land, you know, and kind of, hey, you know, there's these programs sitting over here.
Because
we can help you out.
You're not an employee. You serve. No. You choose to run for the board. You
Yes.
are elected.
We are elected.
And there's 7 positions in the Roosevelt County.
On the Roosevelt board, there are 7. The way the board sits up, there are 5 that are elected, and then a board must have 5 on it in the state statutes.
Okay.
And then they are allowed to appoint 2 more.
Okay.
One thing most people don't realize is that 4 of those 5 elected positions, you must be a landowner to be able to serve on that board, which in my opinion only makes sense.
You're vested.
Yes.
You're vested in that. You're not just giving an opinion when you're not out there doing the work.
You know, and then the the 5th position does not have to be a landowner, nor does the 2 appointed ones. And the appointed ones are from year to year. The other ones are 4-year terms. And
so when our NRCS has employees, you guys are on the board, and this is basically public service, and you all have jobs that, or your farmers and ranchers typically of who serve. Not all.
Not all, but typically, yes.
Okay. All right.
Over here in the rural areas, typically, yes, it is people that are.
And you know, I'm sure there's a really big check that goes along with this.
Oh yeah, we're just rolling it in now.
Yeah. I know it's pretty much it's volunteer.
Yes, it is.
And you're not funded. Basically, do you get funds through the state or any?
We do. Through the District Act, whenever it happened, that did allow for state funding to come to districts every year. It is not a huge dollar amount by any means.
Right.
But yes, we do receive some state funding. Therefore, we have to follow underneath some of their guidelines and so forth. And we since we are a state entity, like we have to follow the Open Meetings Act. Bunch of the our finances all go through DFA.
So the transparency is there.
Yes.
So well, let's talk a little bit about some of the projects over the years.
Okay.
I mean, you touched on cloud seeding, but let's go back to. I remember there were a lot of trees planted.
There were. That was a big program for our district for a lot of years. And, it's kind of neat. You can kind of drive around the countryside and you still see a lot of these trees, and they're windbreak trees. And it was a program through NRCS that we could get some cost share money for people to put up these windbreaks. And then the district jumped in on the deal and said, let's be a supplier of these trees for these people, so they don't, get this big contract, and they're going to get this cost share money to put these trees in there. Then they're looking around, well, where do I get them? And so a lot of the districts back in the 80s and so forth started getting those trees, supplying them that and the drip line systems, the fabric, that we put down. So the tree deal it's neat to look around, and that's still something you can visibly see today. That is still something that the district had to do.
And the purpose of that windbreak is to help with erosion.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I know we actually planted, and this was back in 96, planted 300.
Yeah.
And they were little bitty Ketling junipers, and the drip lines. They were a lot of work, but they're in a horseshoe around the house, and they've helped tremendously of protecting us in our little cocoon.
Yes.
So, and you do see them. So that was a huge project. And then what happened? That kind of dissipated?
Some of the federal side of the thing, as far as the EQIP, that is one of their programs where farmers and ranchers can get this cost share money I talk about is through the EQIP program. They kind of restructured some of that and, wouldn't allow as much of that funding to go towards those type of deals. And so we still sell them, but not near the volume like what we used to. But we do still have a tree sale every spring, and if people want some more Kettler junipers, we'll basically we order what people want. We don't have a big supply like we used to.
So they can contact your local office and set that order up.
Absolutely.
And I know back when I did mine, I think they were $5 or $6 a piece. They were not much, but
they're a little more than that now. But
yeah, we won't talk about that. Well, then you moved on. I know another project that you've had is shade balls.
The shade balls. They it's kind of funny how we came into this deal. We talk about the water, and one of our board members went to a meeting up in Tucumcari, and they were talking about the numbers left me, how many millions of acre feet of water we lose to evaporation off Ute Lake every year.
I read an article about that.
Yeah, and so we just, and we were sitting there in that meeting, and the wheels kind of get to turning a little bit, and you kind of like, in the shade ball, somebody mentioned, well, they got these balls they put on bodies of water to help with evaporation. And so we said, well, let's look into that. Can we get some of those here? What would it be like to put those on stock tanks? Because there's thousands of stock tanks out in our state.
And typically what they look like is just a round black ball that's weighted with some water inside of them, right? They kind of look like your jump pits that the kids play in, but they're black.
Yeah, they're black.
And they're used on stock tanks predominantly, right?
In our part of the world.
In our area.
And where we kind of heard about them was back, they were having a big water shortage out in California. And so they were dumping semi-loads of these out on their reservoirs to help stop evaporation because they were so short on water out in California. So that's where we kind of came up with the idea, well, what would this do in a stock tank? So we set up, we got a hold of a company, and they allowed us to have, they shared with us a handful of balls that we could put on an 8-foot drinker, fiber or plastic drinker that you'd buy at your local feed store. And so we got 2 of those tanks, and we set them side by side. We covered one with shade balls and left the other one open. And our scientific experiment, I guess you could say, I don't know what the right wording is here, but, we would go out there once a week or once every other week, and with a yardstick, stick it in there and see how much evaporation, how many inches, we were losing off each tank. And put that on a spreadsheet. We went back inside, and the good people working in the NRCS office helped us convert that into gallons, how many gallons we were losing. We weren't just losing an inch. Well, how many gallons is that? And then we took that, since we were just on 8-foot tanks, a typical drinker out on a ranch is usually a 15 to 20-foot drinker. They're big tanks. And had them convert it as to how many gallons we were losing. We had no idea. All of us about evaporation off these tanks. Because like I said, they're just little 4-inch balls, little black balls. And just our experiment right there, our covered tank or our uncovered tank, we would fill it 3 times. It would go dry before we would ever fill the one with balls on. So we were just an eye test. You're like, ooh, wow. There's something to it.
There is.
And since then, and we've actually done a little work and a little study and a little more figuring on it. And just to put some numbers to it, we've kind of come up with this, that one ball will save 4 gallons of water a year.
That's pretty amazing.
Just one ball.
That's pretty amazing.
And whenever you talk about those 20-foot drinkers, well, it takes 10 balls per square foot.
Okay.
Is how many balls it takes to, and then you get into a 20-foot tank, and so you're getting into, 2,500 balls or something to cover that. Well,
times 4. 10,000 gallons.
Off one tank.
One tank. That's a conservation.
That's what we're all about.
Well, and I know I had some miniature donkeys, and I actually put them on that little tank, but it also helped with the algae. They were dark, and so the algae didn't grow as much underneath, and I didn't have to break ice near as much.
You just mentioned 2 of the things whenever we go do our PowerPoints and do our programs on them. and I termed them as side effects that we learned. You know, number one, we were out after evaporation, but some of the side effects was during the winter, ice. We didn't have near the ice on those stock tanks. So therefore, you get to thinking how much money and time is a farmer, rancher, whatever, that has to get in their vehicle, drive 5 miles, 10 miles over here, wherever, to go break ice so that their livestock can drink in the winter. Well, if those balls are already doing that for it, how much, you go back to environmental things, you know, less vehicles run around, less fuel we're using, you know, how much money are these things really save us? And the other sidekick, as we found, was the algae, is water quality. So, you know,
the benefits to your livestock on that is huge.
Yes, is huge. You know, we had one rancher over in the Panhandle, Texas, one of our first customers that got those. And he did it for evaporation because he was having to haul water to these cattle on grass. And so he had one year, and he put stocker yearlings on grass during the summer at 2 different places. Had the balls on one place, no balls on the other place, first year or two. What he found, and I thought this was pretty amazing, that whenever it's all said and done, but let me back up just a second. Because any feed specialist, it doesn't matter what's, you know, you go listen to every feed specialist you'll hear, before they start talking about their feed's better than this guy's feed or whatever, the first thing every one of them will tell you is you need to have a clean and plentiful supply of water. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about cattle, sheep, pigs, it doesn't matter. That's their number one thing. So back to the gentleman over in the Panhandle, he had shade balls on one tank, okay? Didn't have them over another tank, which is getting algae on it and so forth. Whenever they shipped those cattle at the end of the year, the ones that had shade balls on them, those cattle gained 3 more tenths of a pound per day than the ones
just
without.
From the clean water.
Was it the clean water?
Or
you know, but that whenever all the feed specialists sit there and tell you clean water is the first and foremost important thing to do for any animal, you got to think the cleaner the water, the more efficient that animal is going to be out there in their intake of nutrition and their growth.
And the conservation on many different levels.
Yes.
The water, the fuel, and then the byproduct of having healthier animals and healthier meats. And we're winding, we don't have a lot of time, but this is something you actually sell there at your office, right?
Yes.
So you can contact, and I know your person that does a great job is Dawn.
Dawn is excellent.
So a shout out to Dawn. Yes. She says she's a great one.
Without her, I don't know what we would do.
But you can contact Dawn and actually set up to purchase the shade balls.
Yes, we have a cost share program that goes along with it.
Okay.
So we can help you out a little bit there on the cost of them. And we're working very diligently on a wildlife study with shade balls on a tank to hopefully persuade some folks that they're not detrimental to wildlife.
Okay.
And so therefore maybe we can get them into the EQIP program, as I talked about, on the federal side of it, to get a little more
cost where they can get some cost sharing.
Cost share and get them bought more reasonable.
Because it is expensive. We were talking about the size of a tank.
They are.
And what does the price run?
I believe right now our cost share would be like 62 cents a ball.
But when you're having to put out
2,000 of them, well, you know, at 2,000 or 3,000 on a tank, it can get expensive.
Over time.
Yeah.
I think we're probably down to almost like a minute. I know we didn't get to touch on cloud seeding, but I know that's something you're also studying and been involved with getting some funding for working on that.
Oh, it's a huge project. And, you know, in a nutshell, the quickest thing I can say about it is whenever our contractors now, and the science behind it, they're so precise about it and can sit here and almost guarantee us that if we seed clouds in your area, that they'll increase your annual rainfall by 12%.
If you can get an extra inch or two a year.
Absolutely.
And the majority of your farming is dry land.
Dry land, true. Yeah, so, I'll always, you know, but even that, if we can just continue to do it year after year after year, you know, well then maybe we can start making a little help on this aquifer deal.
Anything, every little piece of it goes in. I know you do have a Facebook page. You can follow the Roosevelt County Soil and Water Conservation District on the Facebook, and there's also some websites through, just go to your soil and water conservation, just type it in your Google and can come up with some sites on that. Absolutely. Well, Mike, we didn't get through nearly enough, but I really appreciate you coming in and talking to us. And And I'm a believer in those shade balls.
Yeah.
So they're a good product.
They're pretty simple.
Well, thank you
Sim-
for you and all the hard work that your board puts in and
Well,
does for us in our environment and needs that we have.
well, thank you for having us.
Definitely. So thank you for watching. We will see you next time on You Should Know. Cheers.